So recently I sat down with a $20 million per year revenue multidisciplinary clinic to discuss challenges that they were facing, and these were the 3 key insights that I wanted to share with you to help you scale without the drama. And the crazy thing is, there are actually problems that you can solve when you have a smaller team. The first insight is that the same problem for a large business with 100 people is much harder to solve than the same problem for a team with only 5 people. And what I mean by this is, if you're trying to teach 100 people how to pitch their treatment plans better, you can't use the same methods that you can use for 5 people. Now let's break down that first example a little bit. So if you have 100 people versus 5 people and you have the same problem, which is, let's just say they're not able to pitch the treatment plans appropriately. It would not be outrageous to just take your 5 team members into a room and role play or give them a script and just spend maybe 2 or 3 training days over the course of 5 or 6 weeks to get them practicing the script so that they can improve and practice inside the clinic. Because your team is small enough that you can do that, and if you want to do one-on-ones, you can do that too. But once your business scales and you have 100 team members, how are you going to use that same strategy to address 100 people? Well, you can't, because even if you try to talk to each one of them individually for even 30 minutes, 100 people times 30 minutes is 3,000 minutes, which is almost 50 hours worth of one-on-one mentoring. That's just impossible because you're only a finite resource as a clinic owner. Now you might answer, well, maybe I can hire managers that can do the same thing. And that's true. You can hire managers, but then now you've got to train the managers. And if the managers don't have that skill set, then they won't be able to coach their staff the way you can. And you're also running into the problem of, do the managers actually have this ability to coach their clinicians? Another way you might address this issue is maybe you have an entire training day for 100 people and you try and organize an event. The issue with this is, for 100 people, there are going to be so many scheduling conflicts that it's unlikely you're going to get 100 people turning up to that place. And even if you did have 100 people turning up, how are you going to split up the groups to role play? How are you going to monitor? How are you going to express the message clearly so that they will take it home and action it in the clinic? And we could go on forever, but are you even good at public speaking? All these things become more important the bigger your business grows. So if you do have a small business right now, it would be wise for you to develop the solutions to your small scale problems and make sure that it's scalable, because once you do get bigger, those problems will come back and you've already got something to help you solve it in the long term. The second insight is, as a business grows, it needs to develop systems and processes to help it run efficiently. But the problem is, if you develop a system or a process that is overly complex, it's not scalable, and the people you train at it actually can't do a good job at it, then it's highly unlikely that this is going to add value to your business. In fact, if it's too complex, it most likely will make the business even worse. Because what we have to remember is, whatever system or process you implement, it needs to be done by someone else. Otherwise, what's the point of having a process and system? You can just do it yourself. And that's why people who work on their own as solo practitioners generally can have a pretty good time without headaches, because they're not relying on anyone and they know exactly what needs to be done. But as your business grows and you scale to maybe a few locations, you have 3 reception people at each location, you have maybe 1 clinician at each location. How are you going to make sure that the phone calls are answered the same way, the customer service is the same, the initial consultations are the same, and how patients are treated and followed up are all the same? You might create a list of, here are the 10 things you have to do in a consultation. But are those 10 things scalable, in the sense that if you gave that to 100 other clinicians, because that's how big your team might grow, will they actually remember it? And the answer is no, because who remembers 10 things off the bat? Nobody. So when you develop a process or a system, it needs to have simplicity at the forefront of your mind. You cannot add anything that you don't think will be scalable and taught to 100 people and for them to get it. That's why the best systems and processes seem a little bit simpler than they really are. And the simplicity actually is the value of that system. Because if you can't make things simple, it's 100% not scalable at a trainable level. And if that's the case, then you might as well not have one, because it's going to make your business worse. And to add on top of that, if the system is overly complex, like you have a 2-day onboarding process or a 5-day onboarding process that fills the new clinician with a bundle of content that they don't even remember, then is that actually a net benefit, or is that a net negative for your onboarded clinician? Because If they're overwhelmed with what you're giving them in that process or system of training, then you're actually making them worse before they even start their job, which is not really what you want to do, is it? So if you're going to create something, not only do you need to create something, you have to make sure that you've ruthlessly cut down the parts that aren't absolutely necessary for you to get the achieved effect. And what this means is there are things that you will have to cut out which you know are important, but are the 1%ers or 2%ers. You have to focus on just the 3 or 4 core elements of what you want done and prioritize these in the training days so that you do not waste time on things that people are going to forget anyway. The last insight is that simplicity is much more valuable as your business grows than trying to be overly complex. It is much harder to focus on 3 or 4 key points for your staff to be trained in that will give you 80% of your results than to try and cover all bases and train them in everything. Whether your staff or even yourself, you won't remember 100% of everything you're taught. But if I just gave you 3 or 4 points, you're more likely to remember them and action them. Let me give you an example of why it's so important to keep things simple. And I'll use an example of a slogan. I am not personally politically interested in whatever's happening in the US. However, even I know that Donald Trump's slogan is MAGA, or Make America Great Again. Now that's just 4 words, but it's easy to remember and it's spreadable. So over 1 billion people in the world probably know that Donald Trump's slogan right now is Make America Great Again. That is a scalable message that you need to think about when you're creating messages or strategies for your business. If you want 100 clinicians to all be doing something similar, then you can only have 2 or 3 strategic phrases that you want them to do to make sure that most of them will remember and also implement. So one of the examples I can give you is a client of mine has a treatment approach called RAM. Release, activate, modulate. That's it. But if he had to train his new staff about this system, he would just say it's RAM, it's release, activate, modulate. That's it. So that is so easy to remember that I'm confident if he taught this to 1,000 people in a 30-minute presentation, at the very least, they're all going to remember RAM. So the key insight here is it's actually much harder to reduce and refine everything to only 2 or 3 points than it is to throw everything that you know to create a process or system. And the litmus test you can use is this actually useful for 1,000 people? Because if you know that the message cannot be conveyed to 1,000 people, it is highly unmemorable, then it's probably not something that's going to be useful even at something like a 10 to 20 people business. So if you are a clinic owner who intends to scale and you've got a small team right now, or you have just yourself, just remember that what you do right now, what baseline and systems you set right now that you can reliably train other staff in is going to be just as important, if not more important, when you reach the 20, 30, 40, 50, all the way up to 100 or even 1,000 people. And the simpler you make it now, to the point where it almost seems too simple, that's probably where you want to go, because you can always make things more complex. So you do want to scale to become a $20 million business one day, then these are problems that you can start addressing right now while you're by yourself or while your team is small. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.